Okay, so I guess first of all, how's your experience being in Venice with this movie, and has it been a successful trip for you so far?
Well, it's been great. This is the first time I've seen the film with an audience. So to be at the Sala Grande, it's a beautiful theater. It's a big theater, and it was wonderful to get such a warm reception. Little strange to walk in and have a spotlight on you and just have people staring at you and applauding, waving like the Queen. That's I've never done that before.
Nice.
And then at the end of the film, but yeah, it was lovely. Yeah,
And
great response.
Where did this sort of journey start with this film? How did you hear about the story, and what brought you to make it in the first place?
Yeah. Well, so the film is about this notorious book, The Anarchist Cookbook, and the man who wrote it. He wrote it at the age of 19 in 1970, which is a really pivotal time in U.S. history. The civil rights, anti-war protest movement of the late 60s was turning from, somewhat peaceful to more violent. And there were confrontations with police and on college campuses, and the rhetoric on the left was becoming more and more angry and hostile, and the police action toward protesters was becoming more and more severe. So it felt like a really incendiary time. Some people have drawn comparisons to the rhetoric in American politics today in this election, where you have Bernie Sanders talking about a revolution, and there's Trump rallies where people are being violently pulled from the stands, and there are clashes between protesters and counter-protesters. So the kind of angry rhetoric, I think, is a bit similar. I was drawn to that period because I have always just been fascinated with the idea that young people, college-educated, middle class, upper middle class kids really thought that they were participating in a revolution. They thought that they were going to bring the government down. And Bill Powell, at 19, writes this book, The Anarchist Cookbook, a bomb-making manual filled with all kinds of rhetoric about, overthrowing the government and borrowing from Che Guevara and Thomas Jefferson, and publishes this book, and it becomes this kind of cult classic, this kind of overnight sensation, very controversial. Goes on to sell over 2 million copies over time, and I was always interested in the person who wrote the book. And the book went on to be associated with these violent episodes, not only in the 70s, but in the 80s, 90s, and later. And that was not, I think, Bill's intent when he wrote the book at 19. I think it spiraled out of control. And I just thought it would be interesting to talk to him now, at 65, about the ways that the book has impacted his life, the role that it has played in influencing some of these violent episodes, and what kind of toll it has taken on him personally. And I reached out to him and asked him if he would participate in the film, and he agreed.
And I think a lot of people have heard of the book, but I'm guessing not many people have given that much thought to the man that wrote it before.
Right.
And also, my assumption would be that he was some kind of crazy, nut job, basically.
Yeah.
Would be your first assumption. When you kind of first met him, what were your first impressions of him?
Well, yeah, I was surprised at how sort of, professorial he was, and genteel, and, soft-spoken, circumspect, and a real bit of an intellectual. And I liked him very much. He was very, very thoughtful. He obviously had spent a lot of time thinking about the book. He had written two kind of apologias for the book, had basically distanced himself from the book by writing several statements, dismissing it as something that he wrote when he was young, that he no longer believed in, and expressed a sort of remorse about having written this book, and talked about the fact that he had become a teacher and that he was in some ways doing penance, trying to redeem himself for the book.
I mean, I kind of changed my mind throughout as to what, there's points where I really sympathised with him, there's some points where I just thought, is he being, deliberately kind of, I was thinking that sounds really stupid, and, is he being deliberately dishonest here, or is he, I think there's like a real change, and he seemed very considered with all his answers. Was that, did you give him a lot more time? Did he know what he was going to be asked, and is that all the pauses that we see in him? Is that just how he is? Is that how he sort of responds? Yeah,
there is a kind of cat and mouse chess game that goes on, I think, in many interviews, certainly where there's some reluctance on the subject's part. Bill was obviously a willing participant. He agreed to be in the film. He was the focus of the film. It was about him. He knew what he was getting into. We talked about that. And I was empathetic. My perspective was that I came to this with the understanding that he had written it at a young age, and that he probably had thought about it a lot, and that it had taken a toll on him, and I could empathize. So that was kind of the perspective that I started with. And so I think he appreciated that. I think that was part of what made him willing to talk. I didn't realize how reluctant he would be in some of his answers, and I had to provoke and sort of prod him at times that made him uncomfortable, at times that made me uncomfortable. What you see in the film, some of those awkward pauses and Bill searching for words or being very careful in choosing his words, I think is, you're seeing a person trying to control their narrative, trying to control the story that we come to understand about them, and in some ways the story that he uses to understand himself. I think we all tell ourselves stories about our past in order to get through the day and to sleep at night, and if you've done things that you're not proud of, or if you've behaved in a way that is not morally pure, or if you've done things that that you think are cowardly or not noble, we tend to edit those things out of the stories that we tell. And so Bill was not really comfortable talking about the fact that he continued to receive money from the book. That although he says, I disagreed with the book, and I was uncomfortable, and I was worried about the fact that people might harm themselves or others using the book. And when I asked him, what did you do about that? He didn't do anything about it, at least initially. And it wasn't for a very long time before he said anything publicly about that. So I think it's the uneasy reality of sitting down for an interview kind of dawned on Bill as we were talking, and he, I think he was having a hard time deciding what he was willing to admit, and what he wanted to try to continue to spin. And some of that was a complete surprise to me. I mean, for example, I asked him, right at the beginning, about the book and the fact that it advocates the overthrow of the American government, and he says it doesn't. That the book's not a call to action. And then I asked him if he's, when the last time he read the book was, and he says he hasn't read it in 40 years. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's true that he hadn't read it since he wrote it. He obviously reads the book on camera in the film, and finally does admit that indeed it does call for violence and advocate violence. I don't know why he chose to deny that in the moment. And I think, I think he had a hard time. I think he has had a hard time over the course of his life in admitting these uncomfortable truths to himself. So the fact that he was willing to do it on camera, it was very brave on his part. And most of us don't like to look at those ugly truths about our past in isolation, in private. So the fact that he was willing to do it in front of the world to see, and in front of the camera, and to share it with me and to share it with viewers, I was grateful for that, because I think we can learn a lot from him and from his example.
And did you, I don't think, as far as I can remember, I don't think it's ever in the film whether you asked him outright at any point, do you wish you didn't write it? I know there's a lot of stuff about sort of regret and that kind of side of it.
Yeah.
Did you ever blatantly ask him that, and did he respond to that?
Well, I think when he says that he feels remorse about having written the book, we know what he's talking about. We know that what he means is the book has been connected to violent acts and influential in some way, even if it wasn't the cause of violence, even if those people would have found other ways to commit acts of violence without the book. He feels remorse that it was in any way connected or influential. And I'm sure that that's true. I'm sure that it is the sort of thing that haunted him during his life. He also says that he doesn't regret having written the book. And then when I push him, he says, well, maybe we're just playing with words. But I think what he really means when he says that he doesn't regret it is that he's not willing to reject the book. He's not in a position to deny having written the book, or to deny that it has had an impact on his life. And part of that has been positive. I think in part because he wrote this book, he understands what it is to be an angry young man. I think he understands that kind of youthful anger and what it is to kind of lash out at the world. And I think in part that's what made him want to become a teacher and help young kids, disaffected kids, kids who have special learning needs, who don't get a lot of attention in schools, and are the kinds of kids who end up resorting to violence because they don't feel understood. He had a special relationship with those kinds of kids and developed that, I think, because that's who he was. And so I think he doesn't reject the book. He doesn't regret having written it, because I think it helped make him the person he is today. He calls the book his constant companion. And I think some of the difficult trials that he has had because of the book, the fact that it cost him many jobs, that it looked like it might ruin his career at one point because no one would hire the man who wrote the Anarchist Cookbook to be a teacher or to be the headmaster at their school. I think the fact that he has kind of gone through those trials has made him a better person. And in that sense, he doesn't regret having written it. It's made him the person that he is today. It's been his, as he says, his constant companion.
And then we see at the end of the film that he sadly passed away very recently.
Yeah.
Did he get a chance to see the completed film? And also, do you feel in some way happy that maybe he resolved some of the issues to do with the book before, towards the end of his life and before he died?
Yeah, I think that's right, that he did use the film ultimately to resolve some of the issues. I'd like to think that he felt that way. I think that when viewers see the film, that they'll find that he did come to terms with the book in a fundamental way that he hadn't before the film began. And as for how he might have viewed the film had he had the chance to see it, I really don't know. I mean, he obviously experienced it, the interview. I would like to think that he would say that it's a fair portrayal, that it's kind of an accurate picture of of him and his story. It's obviously my version of that story, and I would like to I'd like to think that he would have used the film as a way to speak out more, and in a way that he really didn't get to do during his lifetime. I think there was a lot more that Bill could have done to speak out against the book, to speak out against violence, to use use the infamy of the book as a way to turn it into something positive, and use it as a platform to help people. He chose not to do that during his lifetime, but he made many other contributions. I would like to have thought that, that he would have been able to participate here in Venice, for example, or in having people see the film, to speak out in a bigger way, in a more public way. But hopefully the film will do that for him.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Talk to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was really sad when I saw that at the end. We were like, everyone was like, I mean, it's good for, I guess it's good for the restaurants and bars and stuff, but that's about it, isn't it?
Exactly.
But yeah, if you can avoid those times. Because it was really recent, wasn't it? A couple of months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was after the film. We finished the film, and we didn't know about festivals yet.
Was it France?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah. I did the night I got in. I went over,
Yeah.
just walked around.
You've got to be
No, it's,
Yeah.
I'd never been to India before, but.
we only usually get over there, but maybe like once in the whole 2-week festival. We always try.